Biblo the Owl is likely a former member of Joyboy's crew, joining the trio of Zunesha and Emet from the past two arcs, Wano and Egghead, as this trinity of mysterious ancient characters who are one by one being revealed to be Joyboy's former comrades. We had the mysterious elephant who turned out to be Joyboy's comrade, we had the mysterious robot who turned out to be Joyboy's comrade, Biblo the mysterious owl is up next in the lineup, and the craziest thing is that it seems like it's not just going to stop there. There's actually a major hint back in the Wano arc that we are going to be having several characters from Joyboy's crew appear in the final arc of the story. And Oda actually seems to have planned out a crucial role in the narrative from the very beginning, that only characters from the Void Century could play in the final war. This explanation is going to get a little crazy, so strap in and let me break down what it appears we're heading towards with Joyboy's crew from the top, starting with Biblo. And make sure to subscribe. But first, we're doing a huge summer sale, where you can buy any 2 posters and get 3 free. And we mean any 2 posters, because this month, all collections are on sale. The Island posters, the Ship posters, and the Legends posters. Just mix and match any posters you like from across all collections, and the huge discount will be automatically applied at checkout. We are offering this site-wide deal for August only, so if you've been waiting to get your hands on any of these collections, now is the time. So get your poster while this summer sale lasts by hitting the link in the description below. So that aside, the last 3 arcs of One Piece, Wano, Egghead, and Elbaf have all had a pattern of mysterious, silent ancient characters revealing themselves at the climax of each arc to actually be Joyboy's comrades. First we had Zunesha. For a long time, Zunesha was just this mysterious ancient elephant who had been alive for a millennium, who never spoke, who no one understood, and whose entire existence and purpose was an enigma. Until suddenly, at the end of Wano, Zunesha finally reveals that they are a former comrade of Joyboy, who has actually been awaiting the second coming of Joyboy for the past 800 years. Next we had Emet, this mysterious ancient robot who had been around since the time of the Ancient Kingdom, who never moved or spoke, who even Vegapunk didn't understand, whose entire existence and purpose was an enigma, until suddenly, at the end of Egghead, Emet finally gets up and reveals himself to be a former comrade of Joyboy as well. And finally, we now have Biblo, completing this mysterious ancient trinity. Much like Zunesha and Emet in the preceding arcs, Biblo is a mysterious ancient owl who has been around for centuries, who is completely silent, who no one can understand or communicate with, and whose existence and purpose are a complete enigma. And just as Zunesha was revealed to be a comrade of Joyboy at the end of Wano, just as Emet was revealed to be a comrade of Joyboy at the end of Egghead, so too is it likely that Biblo is going to be revealed to be a comrade of Joyboy at the end of Elbaf. And what do you know, almost exactly on cue, as the final battle of the arc is raging, just as Zunesha and Wano's final battle and Emet and Egghead's final battle, now is the moment that Biblo is finally opening his mouth to speak and give us some revelations. And what's especially interesting about this trio is that all 3 of them seem to have been on entirely different missions for the last 800 years, and each of their missions is still yet to be explained. Zunesha, for some reason, has been made to walk the seas ever since the Void Century. Emet apparently attempted to attack Marijua by himself before being stopped. Biblo has been staying dormant in Elbaf, but has been helping the giants to be able to read and educate themselves. So all 3 of them are carrying out different tasks, likely for different reasons, all of which will likely make sense once we finally get the backstory of Joyboy and his crew. However, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg, because I believe that there are actually 2 halves to Joyboy's crew that we are going to see in the story. One group that is still here in the modern world today, and one group that is yet to arrive. So to be clear, I believe that there are other members of Joyboy's crew that we will soon see who have been sent from Joyboy's time to the future, and they are going to arrive just in time for the promised day of prophecy, when the battle for the dawn of the world is set to begin. To understand what I mean, let's look back at the Wano arc. Now, I've talked about this many times in the past, but the parallels between the story of Oden and the story of Joyboy continue to grow more and more blatant as the story continues, and Elbaf is pushing those parallels even further. I've explained this before in past videos, but I'll quickly summarize here. Oden was the first pirate to ever come out of Wano. Joyboy was the first pirate in the world in general. Oden was supposed to become the shogun of Wano, but it never quite happened because an evil dictator took over instead. Joyboy was supposed to become the king, but that never quite happened because an evil dictator took over instead. The nation of Wano fell when Oden lost to Kaido, the ancient kingdom fell when Joyboy lost to Imu and the allied kings. After Oden's loss, Wano entered a dark period oppressed by an evil ruler. After Joyboy's loss, the world in general entered a dark period oppressed by an evil ruler. Before he died, Oden passed on a will to the future, aka the will of the Kozuki, of specifically a promised day 20 years in the future where the evil that had taken over the land would be defeated and the dawn would come to Wano. Just as before Joyboy died, he passed on a will, aka the will of D, to the future of a promised day 800 years in the future where the evil that had taken over the world would be defeated and dawn would come to the entire world. Like, seriously, it's beat for beat the exact same plot copy-pasted, and if you're wondering why would Oda write such a blatant beat for beat copy of the story of Joyboy and the Will of D and insert it into the Wano arc, it's because Oda loves foreshadowing, and the entire central premise of the Wano arc was that this is the storyline where Oda finally starts unveiling Luffy's destiny as the successor of Joyboy. Remember, prior to Wano, Joyboy had only been mentioned once, and we had no real context about him. It was only in Wano where suddenly everything became all about Joyboy. Kaido's actually been in Wano all this time because he's waiting for Joyboy. The Pirate King, Gold Roger himself, is suddenly revealed to have merely been following in Joyboy's footsteps. The protagonist of our entire story turned out to be carrying on this mysterious Joyboy's will all along. Wano was when the Joyboy bonanza really began. And so with that being an arc that all along specifically served to launch the overarching mysteries of Joyboy that hold the answers to the entire story of One Piece, it makes complete sense that Oda gave us a ton of foreshadowing of Joyboy's tale through the story of Oden. So considering all of the commonalities that Joyboy is turning out to have with Oden, being the first pirate of his kingdom, he was supposed to become king but never did, his defeat allowed evil to take over, his will was passed on into the future to bring the dawn, so on and so forth, now we're even seeing another new commonality with Oden. Just like Oden, Joyboy also has subordinates who survived since the big defeat of the past and have been hiding ever since, waiting for the promised time to rise back up and unveil themselves and fight for the dawn of their land. Think about it, Oden passed down the will to his subordinates, and they all planned for the promised day 20 years in the future where they would take back Wano and bring the dawn to the land. And to do so, several of Oden's subordinates went into hiding throughout Wano, waiting for that day. Ashura Doji, Denjiro, and Kawamatsu, each with their own task, each preparing for the coming battle for the dawn. That's the same thing as what appears to be the case with Zunesha, Emet, and Biblo. Zunesha has been waiting for the return of Joyboy and the one who can command him, Momonosuke. Emet seems to have been waiting for when the time is right for him to fight again, and Biblo's goal is seemingly about to be revealed. All comrades of Joyboy, all hiding throughout the world, all waiting for the right time to help fulfill his will and bring the dawn, exactly like Oden's scabbards. But here's the thing, that was only one group of Oden's scabbards, wasn't it? There was another set of scabbards who had an entirely different journey. Half of Oden's scabbards were actually transported ahead of time into the future, all the way to the time of the promised battle, so that when they arrived, they could reunite with the other scabbards and begin the battle for the dawn of Wano. So that leads us to the question of the rest of Joyboy's crew. I believe that they were also sent to the future. Why? Because again, Oda seems to be reusing the plot point of Toki sending people forward in time. See, it's been strongly implied that there is a greater role for Toki to play that Oda is still hiding from us, and it has to do with what she did in her original time. Remember, Oda never told us why Toki was continually traveling forward towards the future, or why she specifically needed to get to Wano. It's also implied that Toki was meant to continue traveling further to the future, but she instead chose to stop moving forward once she met Oden as she fell in love. Oda playing so coy with where Toki was originally from, her true goal, and the true time period she's trying to get to, all point to the same answer. Toki is from the Void Century, and she was on a mission moving forward through time to get to the time where the Will of D is ready to be fulfilled. As such, Toki's true role in the overarching plot of One Piece is something that is only going to be revealed when we get to the Void Century flashback. And considering it was so important to Toki to get to Wano specifically, and considering once Oden discovered the true history, he also realized that he needed to get back to Wano for Joyboy's return, it's extremely likely that Toki was one of Joyboy's comrades as well, trying to get to Wano. So considering the Wano arc introduced the idea of sending half of Oden's scabbards to the future to the time of the battle for the dawn of the land, I think it's very likely that the same thing happened 800 years ago with Joyboy and his crew. We know that when Joyboy's coalition lost, Joyboy quickly took steps to pass down a will, and prepare for a coming war in the future where the world could be freed and the dawn would come. The poneglyphs themselves are evidence of this. Joyboy created a plan and executed it, making sure that messages could be passed on to the future. But I don't think that's the only thing that was passed on to the future. Toki's presence in the Void Century all but guarantees it. I think that while several of Joyboy's crewmates, Zunesha, Emet, and Biblo, all were scattered for different reasons throughout the world, and resigned themselves to waiting out the 800 years till the time for the battle for the dawn, I think there was a separate group of crewmates that were actually literally sent into the future by Toki, and I think this group is yet to arrive in the modern day world. As for why Toki didn't simply travel with this group herself, I actually explained that in this week's Morgecast that just dropped, but it's a little too lengthy to explain that here. The point is that Joyboy's crew essentially become the scabbards of the broader story. The crew members who are already here, Zunesha, Emet, and Biblo, will have some role to play, and there are others who will likely arrive soon from Joyboy's era who will have their own role to play as well. Now, the main question you may have is what would be the purpose in Oda doing all this? Why do we need characters from the distant past? So this is where we delve into the actual mechanics of what makes One Piece's storytelling tick. I don't think having Joyboy's crew arrive in the modern day is just for the sake of seeing cool characters from the past or Oda throwing a twist in there. I think this is actually something Oda planned from the beginning of the story because it may be genuinely important for an emotional payoff for the Void Century storyline. So let's take a step back and think about the structure of most One Piece storylines. The structure of most One Piece storylines is basically something really bad happened in the past, some sort of dark backstory, and after us getting to read that tragic backstory, we get to then see that tragedy reversed in the modern day, when Luffy and the Straw Hats arrive and right the wrongs of the past. In the past, Arlong took over Nami's village and killed her mom, but then Luffy in the modern day defeats Arlong and saves Nami and her village. In the past, Wapol made all of Drum Kingdom and Hiruluk suffer, but Luffy in the modern day defeats Wapol and allows Drum Kingdom to be reborn. In the past, Doflamingo took over Dressrosa and turned everyone into toys, but Luffy in the modern day defeats Doflamingo and frees everyone, so on and so forth. And what happened to the world of One Piece at large is essentially the same thing. Imu eradicated the ancient kingdom and made the whole world suffer, and now 800 years later, in the modern day, Luffy is carrying the will of D and is going to defeat Imu and bring the dawn to the world. However, the difference in this case is time. Usually when Oda writes the setup of tragic event in the past and Luffy then reversing it in the present, this sequence of events all takes place in a relatively small span of time. It's a decade or two at most between the initial tragedy and then Luffy reversing it in the modern day. Meaning, and this is the key part, the characters who experience the original tragic event, the characters who we see suffer in the backstory, are also the characters who we get to then see finally get their catharsis in the modern day and brings justice against the ones who caused their suffering. We see Nami, Nojiko, and the rest of the villagers experience the dark takeover of Arlong, and then all these years later we get to see those same characters rejoice as Luffy finally defeats Arlong and brings them justice. We see how terrible Wapol was to Chopper and Dalton in the past, and in the present we see Chopper, Dalton, and all the villagers rejoice as Luffy defeats Wapol and brings them justice. We see the suffering Shirahoshi, Neptune, and the princes went through when Hori first killed Otahime in the past, and in the present we get to see them rejoice as Luffy defeats Hori and brings them justice. We see Doflamingo destroy the lives of Law, the Tontadas, the Riku family, and so on, and then in the present we get to see all of them rejoice as Luffy defeats Doflamingo and brings them justice. We see Kaido kill Oden and break the hearts of his scabbards and Oden's son, and then in the present, we see all of those characters get to rejoice as Luffy defeats Kaido and brings them justice. So in all of these storylines, the grand moment of emotional catharsis is always when the characters who originally experienced the tragedy, injustice, and suffering in the backstory get to finally experience all of that being undone and resolved by Luffy in the modern day. But with the final war, the war to conclude the entire story of One Piece and resolve the 800-year-long evil, there's a bit of a problem, which is that in this case, the original tragic backstory that started it all takes place, well, obviously 800 years ago, and everyone from that time period should be dead. The characters who we will actually be following in the Void Century flashback, whose story of suffering we will get to experience, can't logically be alive in the modern day, meaning that we're going to be missing that usual connective emotional tissue that Oda normally likes to write, of characters suffering in the past and then getting to experience justice in the present. And that really is what most of One Piece's cathartic climaxes are built on. Now obviously we'll still have plenty of strong emotions just from seeing the Celestial Dragons and the world government toppled in general. I mean, they've also done so many terrible things to the characters who are alive today, regardless of the Void Century flashback, but I'm just saying specifically when it comes to the emotional momentum of the tragedy of the Void Century, it's just not really going to carry over in the same way to the modern day battle quite as well as previous storylines without having those connecting characters. The only other comparable situation to this is arguably the Skypiea flashback, wherein the primary characters of that flashback, Noland and Kolgara, of course died a long time ago before the modern day events. However, in this case, at the very least, their descendants in the modern day still carry extremely strong emotional ties to their ancestors. They were deeply aware of the tragedies of their ancestors and carried that pain and suffering within them every day. So there was still deep emotional meaning to seeing the pains of their ancestors resolved. But in the case of the Void Century, the whole point is that it's the Void Century. Everything that happened in that century is gone from everyone's memories. Even the giants who lived for centuries don't have any knowledge of it. And so, unlike the case of Skypiea, the characters today who seem to be descendants of the Void Century cast of characters, the D-Tribe members, well, none of them generally know much, if at all, about their origins. Most of them don't even know what the D means. Hardly anyone today has any sort of emotional stake in terms of what happened in the Void Century. So with all that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if Oda gave us a preview of what he's planning for the final arc in the Wano arc, sending characters from the past to the future, to carry emotional momentum from the Void Century backstory to the present. If this huge, grand Shakespearean tragedy took place in the Void Century, and it's only now 800 years later that a battle will finally take place to right the wrongs of the Void Century, then I wouldn't be surprised if, for emotional payoff purposes, Oda wanted a large number of the core cast of characters from the Void Century to be able to travel to the future and be a part of that battle and experience the dawn of the world. So I think some, like Zunesha and Emet, who have stayed around since the Void Century, are already evidence that Oda wants to bring things full circle for Joyboy's crew, and have them be alive to be a part of the dawn of the world, which is precisely why I think the rest of the crew is on their way as well for that exact same reason. So let me know in the comments below if you believe we will be seeing visitors from the past in this arc, and if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to hear the surprising location where I believe the Void Century characters will arrive, spoilers, it's not Laughtale, then you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below.